All right, we continue on 91b. Firstly, I asked yesterday if anybody knew anything about Antoninus, who's having this conversation with Rabbi Yehuda, or Rabbi, as the Gemara refers to him. So I'll just tell you what Steinsaltz here says. I'm quoting directly. Many scholars have attempted to determine the identity of the Roman emperor who was close friend with Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. One of the primary difficulties is that there were several Roman emperors during that period who bore the name Antoninus. Furthermore, there are several instances where Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, is simply called Rabbi, as was his grandfather. So the Gemara here says Rabbi asked Antoninus, well, which one was it, the first Rabbi or the second Rabbi, which would change which Antoninus it is. Based on the chronology and the probability of the encounters taking place in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael, it is likely that the Antoninus in question was Marcus Aurelius, a renowned Stoic philosopher. It is possible that he encountered with Hanassi in Eretz Yisrael before his appointment as emperor. So that's what Rabbi Steinsaltz has on who Antoninus is. Okay, so as promised, we're going to give a little of a philosophical / Chassidic explanation to this very interesting conversation. So let's recap. Antoninus asks Rabbi, why does the sun rise in the east and set in the west? Rabbi answers, and if it was the reverse, you would ask me the other question. You would ask me the other way. To which Antoninus responds, no, I'm asking specifically, why does it set in the west? Rashi interprets that question to mean, had it set in the same place it rises, it would make sense. This is where Rashi interprets it. I wouldn't ask you, because it comes out, does its job, and goes back to its original place. I'm asking specifically why it sets in a place different from where it rises. That's the way Rashi interprets the question. The Gemara continues, that Rabbi responds, it sets in the west to say hello, to pay homage to its maker. The presence of Hashem is in the west. Citing a verse. At which point Antoninus says, well, if that's the case, it should rise halfway to the earth, and then pay homage there, and then go away. In that, when you say hello to a king, you don't go all the way up to him, you stand some distance. So Rabbi Yehuda responds that this would be, Rabbi Yehuda responds by saying that would be inconsiderate to travelers and workers who midday the sun disappears. They need that time when the sun slowly sets. So all these questions about the astronomy of this and what this means and all that. So let's attempt to explain this on a little deeper level. And I'm still wrinkling out the is that the word wrinkling out the ironing out the creases. So bear with me as we go along with this.
Well, in those days, if they walked,
yeah,
I mean, you got to walk 1,000 miles just to
what? To get anywhere.
Yeah.
That's the point. If people start traveling, the sun goes down, and midday, you're stuck. You're stuck with no light.
Still going to be stuck for a few days.
What do you mean? Yeah, no. The point is, you don't have warning as to when night is to go find a place to sleep.
Like Abraham, I think, walked from Turkey to.
People used to walk all the time like that. That's not the problem. The problem here is that travelers. That's true.
On a daily basis.
Even if a person travels, takes weeks, walking for weeks, but you only walk while the sun's up.
Yeah.
When the sun slowly sets, you see it's coming nighttime, you go find a place to stay. But if the sun went mid-sky and then disappeared, then the traveler would lose the warning that it's going to come night. That's the point that Rabbi is making. The same thing with the guy who's working in the field. All of a sudden, it just goes dark on him.
Yeah, it's a daily activity.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course, it could have gone in the middle and gradually go back.
That doesn't seem to be the implication.
Yeah.
Anyway.
With resolve both the things.
Right, which then makes what does Rabbi Yehuda mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Makes our questions compounds the questions on the story, which are many. Certainly, if we're going to take astronomy into the equation. Okay, so perhaps Antoninus, when he asks Rabbi why the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, what he's asking is, perhaps he's asking, is there a specific logic to creation, to nature? Nature operates in a certain way. Right? Is there a specific design? So Rabbi Yehuda responds and says, well, if it was a different design, you would ask the same question. What does he mean when he says that? What he means to say is that the nature of nature is consistency. That's what makes nature nature. As Chassidus explains, the word, based on earlier text, the word teva, which is Hebrew word for nature, actually means consistency. We have this similar in a few things, like whoever changes from the stamp that the sages have stamped, which is said in context of someone who changes the way a bracha is made. In other words, there's a certain stamp, this is the way it's done, keep it that way. Tuvu b'yam, likewise, something that's set in stone. The word teva in Hebrew comes from the root word consistency. So the nature of nature is consistency, meaning to say there's nothing more miraculous about a miracle than nature. It's only that one happens every day and one happens once in history. So there's nothing more miraculous, there's nothing more unique about the sea, the ocean splitting at the crossing of the Red Sea than there is about the fact that the sun rises and sets. They're both equally miraculous. The difference is one happens every day, so you don't question it. The other one happens once in. So Yehuda is saying that's the nature of nature. The nature of nature is consistency. So you're asking about if there's a specific design. I mean, the point is you have a design and it stays consistent. So if it went this way, it went that way, it would still make the same point, keeping consistency in nature. To which Antoninus replies and says, no, I'm asking specifically about the fact that the sun is setting in the west. Meaning to say, if the issue is consistency, right, then you can put it this way. When he changes his question the second time, he doesn't ask, in the actual Gemara, the only thing he changes is when he asks first, he says, why does it rise in the east and set in the west? And then the second time he says, no, I'm asking why it sets in the west. He just drops the first half about rising in the east. Meaning to say, I'm asking specifically why the sun is always moving westward. Because technically speaking, it's always setting in the west. Right? As it's always rising in the east. But it's always setting in the west. Meaning to say, the sun is always in a mode of both providing light to one location and taking away light to the other location, as opposed to coming out, doing its job, and going back to wherever it came from. Now, you're worried about the astronomy of it? Well, you just finished saying as long as it consistently happens every day, it's fine. So who cares how it happens? God will figure out how to make nature. In other words, if anyway what makes nature nature is not that it somehow fits into some logical structure, but that there's consistency, so make the consistency in some other way, that it comes out, does its job, and leaves. As for the astronomy, who cares? We'll figure it out. When it happens every day consistently, it'll make sense. In other words, the astronomy now makes sense only after the fact because it's consistency, as you just said. If it went this way or that way, it's the same thing. So if that's the case, then let the sun come out, do its job, leave. It doesn't have to be perpetually going westward. To which Yehuda replies and says, no. Embedded in nature, there's consistency, but an embedded in nature is paying homage to the maker of nature. Embedded in the consistency of nature is the fact that nature itself pays homage to Hashem.
Because Hashem created nature. So
Hashem created nature.
It's for a purpose, yeah. It's not just,
correct.
See, the Romans believe it's nature, just like nature. It's just like that's the way things are.
And Yehuda is agreeing that there's consistency in nature, which makes in nature.
There's a consistency, but it's not random. There's a plan behind it.
So that's here. So Yehuda Nasi says, no, even in the consistency of nature, there's embedded the fact that nature sings the song of its creator, constantly saying shalom, as the pasuk here, as the verse says it here, to Shechina, to the presence of Hashem, which is in the west. So says Antoninus, hold on a second. The reason why nature is created in such a fashion, and that entire design, keeping consistency, is so that it pays homage to its maker, then let it be obviously so. The consistency as it stands right now is built in such a fashion that people don't even know that nature is paying homage to its maker. If the sun went up into the sky and then disappeared at midday, then everybody would say, ooh, the sun is paying homage to its maker. And the fact that it doesn't make sense, well, that's the point. That's the whole point. Right now, you're telling me it's paying homage to its maker, but nobody sees that because it's always going westward. Make it do something else in midday. Let it truly, like a really the way stand back from the king, and you can see the king is here and the sun is here and it's paying homage and it disappears. To which Rabbi Yehuda Nasi replies, that our problem is the travelers and those who work. Who are the travelers and those who work? Jewish people. The Jewish people in our service of Hashem are referred to both as workers and as travelers. We have the statement, Anan Paladi, Mama Anan. We are day workers, meaning to say that so long as we are living on this earth, our job is to serve Hashem. In the Perek Chelek, a number of times we are referred to as Poyalim, as employees of Hashem. A number of times we're referred to that way. And likewise, travelers, especially as the next conversation is about to get to the soul, the next conversation between Antoninus and Yehuda is about to get to the soul. The Jewish people, as we're living on this earth, are travelers. The soul doesn't have life or death. The soul just has stages. The stage of its existence prior to birth, the stage of its existence during this lifetime, and the stage of its existence after this lifetime. But it doesn't have life or death. It's a traveler. It's a constant traveler. And especially here, while it's on this earth, it's temporarily. The soul's home is not this world. The soul's home is the spiritual world until the day Mashiach comes when we make this world the home for Hashem. But until that time, the soul is traveling in this world. Right? There's a famous story of a Chassidic master. Baal Shem Tov told a wealthy fellow to go visit, that during his travels he should go say hello to one of his students. And he goes to that town, seeks out the student. And given the nature of the Baal Shem Tov students, who were very humble, notwithstanding their scholarship, nobody in town knew who this guy was. Nobody knew that he was such a great scholar. He was the poor guy who slept on the bench in the back of shul, and they find the traveler finally finds the student, the disciple of the Baal Shem Tov, and this disciple is so excited. You met the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov told you to say hello to me. He's so excited he can't believe it. The Baal Shem Tov actually thought about him to send a traveler to come say hello to him. Come to my house. You must stay with me. The rich merchant traveler stays in the home of the student of the Baal Shem Tov, and he sees that the student's home is bare, desolate, nothing there. And the next morning, the traveler asks the disciple, how do you live like this? How do you live like this? So the disciple asks the traveler, well, how do you live? He describes his home with the chandeliers and the couches and the furniture and all the rest of it. And the disciple asks the traveler, and when you travel, you also sleep with such comfort? She says, no, when I travel, I make do. You're traveling, you make do. And when you get home, you get back to your comfort. So the disciple says, I'm also traveling. This earth, the physical stuff in this world, doesn't mean anything to me. I'm also traveling. So I make do. So the Jewish people are called both workers and travelers. And what's more than, unless he's saying that the sun has to consistently go to the west all the way and not be so obvious in its praise of Hashem, what does it mean to say that that's for the travelers and the workers? To give us free choice. If nature itself obviously praised Hashem, which would mean everywhere we walk we would see the praise of Hashem, we would have no free choice to choose to not serve, to not travel on the path, or to travel the wrong direction, or to be a poil, to be a worker for the wrong reasons. So for the sake of the workers and the travelers, for the sake of us, the Jewish people, and our work and traveling towards Hashem, it's important that the sun, that the earth, that nature has a consistency in that its praise of Hashem is embedded in consistency, so that on the one hand, nature indeed does praise Hashem, but it's not obvious. Because if it were obvious, it would ruin our work and traveling in service of Hashem. And it requires our look to see, one second, look at this consistency. Which way is it going? It's going Ma'ariv, it's going to west. West is where the Shekhinah is, it's praising Hashem. The point is, it's meant to be embedded in nature, but it's meant to be concealed from the obvious observation, so that the workers can do their job with free choice, and the travelers can choose their path with free choice. So perhaps that's the deeper meaning of this conversation.
I would choose to find it literally, the travelers and workers, that Hashem has to be acknowledged, but also it works both ways. Adam l'makom, Adam l'chaveroi. Hashem organizes the world by nature, consistency, to praise Him, but also benefit people as well. They can do their job and they can travel just like so that's there for their benefits. That's what's giving you a balance. You have to serve Hashem, but also you have to serve people.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I went with this, because if
so
every
it seems to imply travelers and workers, even non-Jews, it seems to benefit.
I know. I'm taking it not literally. I'm taking the Gemara. I'm taking the Gemara not literally, obviously.
More literal explanation.
Yeah. The reason why one of my issues that I'm trying to contend with on that simple way of reading is that if the sun consistently every day left the sky midday, then everybody would know. As you see sun get to midday, it's going to disappear soon. Get a place to sleep. if that's the only problem. In other words, if you know every day that when the sun's in the middle of the sky, it disappears, so then when it's about to get to the middle of the day, you know the day's over. Especially, like you said, if it's going to go back to the east, then certainly it's going to slowly set in the east.
Well, it could have gradually set that's more than an internet possibility.
Right, but then
midday and then gradually go back to the east.
Right, if it went east, then gradually back to the east, then you would know when night's coming also.
Yeah.
Either way, you'd know when night's coming. In other words, if it's consistently that way, you'd know night's coming. That was one of my reasons. That's one of my reasons for taking this interpretation a little bit not literal, because
But even if it's in the middle of the sky, people don't exactly know. More than in half an hour, they don't know exactly when it's going to be. It could be silent.
a half hour you don't, but an hour difference you know.
Yeah, I know.
In other words, you can see in an hour it's coming.
Yeah.
Even
Anyway.
in northern times, I mean, we know that even though there's 23 and a half hours night or 23 hours night in northern areas, people know.
They know when it's coming and they know when it's going. Yeah. Anyway, that's the reason why. It's one of the reasons why I'm taking it not so literal. Yeah. Anyway, it's not a literal interpretation, and obviously there are more layers to this. And the floor. You're welcome to think about the story and what it means, but this is my suggested interpretation.
Did anybody ever think of at that time the Earth is turning?
The Earth itself is spinning?
Yeah.
I don't know. Actually, not.
The sun is staying straight.
Actually, not.
Place, the Earth is spinning from west to east.
Yeah, by Jewish by Torah observation, it's the reverse.
Well, they're both going around.
By Torah observation, it's the reverse. The Earth stays in one place and the sun spins around it. And sorry, you don't understand how it can work.
I can't believe that.
If you're really serious about studying the matter, the Rabbi has lengthy letters in explaining the science behind it, following current science.
3 years of astronomy.
So it doesn't change any of it. If you read Rebbe's letter, it doesn't change any of the astronomy you learned. It actually just puts it in the reverse. In other words, the Rebbe relies on a certain reading of Einstein's theory of relativity, in that when two things are moving relative to each other, it's impossible to know which one's standing straight and which one's moving. And therefore, all the calculations you do in astronomy are exactly right, just exactly opposite, exactly in the inverse. So in theory, if you took a satellite and you put it, and you put the calculation in such a fashion that it spins the way it does right now, and if you took that same calculation but you put it exactly in the inverse, so instead of putting plus, you put minus, it would spin the exact same way. And that's what I was doing with the sun on the moon, with the sun on the earth. In other words, everything you learned in astronomy remains as is. It's just a question of the inverse. So it's harder to imagine it. And if you were a scientist putting a satellite in the orbit, I wouldn't suggest doing it in the reverse and making it exactly inverse of every other satellite spinning in the orbit. But in the theoretical abstract observance of it, it comes out the exact same. That's their argument, essentially. But
the science, of course, holds the other way.
I'm saying that they're making the scientific argument.
No, but they don't relatively, but they hold that the Earth is spinning.
I understand that.
They even see when they're, of course, in the space.
I understand that. Never explains why he doesn't believe that that's scientifically provable, even though it makes sense. That's what I'm saying.
Science definitely about relativity.
I'm telling you, read the letters, and you'll see there, but Rebbe doesn't speak on Torah terms there. Yeah. He speaks in scientific terms as to why, scientifically speaking, it's more convenient to describe the sun at the center, but it isn't a...
it's also the gravitation and everything, because if...
The Rebbe talks about, addresses that also.
Because otherwise the
Rebbe addresses that also. The Rebbe addresses all that also. The Rebbe addresses all of this. Yeah. If you're interested, let me know, I'll send you a link. The Rebbe explains, it has lengthy letters explaining this to Professor... Who wrote the book Mind Over... he wrote a book, the professor wrote a book based on the Rebbe's letters to him. Can't remember his name or the name of his book. Mind and Matter? Mind Over Matter? Something like that. The professor wrote a book based on his correspondence with the Rebbe. And most of the book is available online on Chabad.org. You can see there his correspondence. And there, no. And there the Rebbe lays out from a scientific perspective, not using Torah terms, but using scientific terms as to why it's perhaps more convenient when you're making these mathematical calculations to put the sun at the center, but it isn't an observable. It isn't an observable. What's the word? No. Imperative. It's not an observable imperative that the sun has to be at the center, and that keeps all the signs consistency. Just putting the sun putting the moon, including gravitational pull, just putting the sun at the Earth at the center. Again, I'm not a scientist. I don't fully understand everything there, but it's all there.
It's very interesting because this whole theory of relativity, as you say, is based on not what people think it is, but rather the relativity with respect to who is looking at it. And as a result, that's where the whole concept, for example, if we have a train that's going 100 miles an hour, another train that's going 50 miles an hour, basically
the movement is different relative to each other.
Exactly, and as a result, there's you say that there's a stationary element that is really taking place, but the movement as such would only be
right.
It's a very different.
And the bottom line is
perspective.
Yeah. So from the astronomical looking at the world, there is no looking at the entire universe. There is no stationary item from which you can say everything else is moving around. Right. So, anyway, I'm saying there is no stationary item that's outside of the universe to say that the universe is moving relative to. Everything's within the universe moving against each other.
Sitting still.
Sorry?
I don't think anything is sitting still and not moving.
So, again, you can think whatever you want. Anyway, I'm not a scientist. I don't want to get into all this, but I'm just telling you that it does address all the scientific issues and retains all of the astronomical math and just puts the sun at the earth. Just puts the earth at the center and explains all the science.
And movement,
I'm just going to leave it there because I don't understand it all.
And movement itself is relative because of the fact that when we think that something is stationary, it's the whole idea of stationary and movement is all very relative in itself.
Yeah.
For example, with regard to heartbeat, with regard to what people would think would be movement or tremors and so on, with regard to also blood pressure and so on, and the movement that takes place in the body. So it's all very relative. What is movement? What is not? What is So it's all very
David talks about all this. I to be honest, I don't fully understand all the letters because I'm not a scientist. I'm not a scientist, obviously, but I'm just telling you that it's available. And if you are interested in the literature, I'm happy to share it with you. Okay, sorry?
Rabbi could have answered him that the Holy of Holies was in
the West. Holy of Holies is in the West. The temple...
You enter from the east.
You enter from the east and slowly progress west towards the Holy of Holies.
Yeah, that's the Gemara gives that answer.
Yeah, that's the Gemara talking about. Actually, the Gemara doesn't say so clearly, but it's talking about Shechina B'Mayra. That's what it's referring to. When we say Shechina B'Mayra, that's what it's talking about.
Rashi explains, but that's applied to the Gemara.
Right. When the Gemara says that Shechina B'Mayra, the presence of Hashem is in the West, it's a reference to the temple, and that the temple is holier as you get westward.
Yeah, and same with the Mishkan too. Both.
All of it, yeah.
Right.
You enter from the east and you go to the west.
So he could have made an argument on that.
He did.
That is the argument he makes.
It's in the Gemara.
That is the argument he makes, that by going west, it's paying homage to its maker because you get holier as you go westward. Which is why it's always going west.
Talking about the center.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Let's do one more story, and maybe we'll get more of deeper level again on Monday. One more part of this conversation. And here, actually, Antoninus teaches Rabbi something. And the next two conversations, Antoninus teaches Rabbi something, and Rabbi readily admits it. And Antoninus taught me something. And that is, Amalei Antoninus Rabbi. And it has very strong applications to lots of controversies in today's climate. In case the earth being at the center wasn't controversial enough, now it's about to come. Maybe not controversial at this table, but controversial elsewhere. Antoninus said to Rabbi, Neshama, the soul, me'em masai nitna ba'adam. At what point does it enter person? Mishas pekida, from the time of conception, and mishas tetzira, or from the time of formation. That is in the body's first form, the fetus's first form, which is roughly 40 days after conception. Amarle. So Rabbi said, mishas tetzira, from the time of formation. Before that, there's no body in which the soul should go into. I should add here that Rashi mentions when describing what conception is, that the Gemara elsewhere in Nida says that when a seed is produced and making its way to fertilize an egg, the seed is brought forward by an angel to Hashem, and it's asked, what kind of seed is this going to be? Tall, skinny, rich, not rich, that kind of thing. So that's what Rashi says Pekida means, but it means the time of conception essentially, or the moment just before conception when God decides the fate of this seed. So Rabbi said, Mishas Yitzira, from the time of formation, from 40 days into pregnancy, that's when the soul enters the body, because there is no body before then. Amalei, So Antoninus responded, no. Efshir chaticha shel basar and meda shleisha yamim. Can a piece of meat stand for 30 days, b'lei melech without salt?
3 days.
Sorry, 3 days. Shleisha yamim, 3 days. B'lei melech without salt. Ve'edim asrachas, and it won't start to stink, to rot. Today we would use refrigerators or freezers instead, but the same point. And likewise, if that's the case, the seed, which is just a piece of flesh, and the egg it's fertilizing, should essentially start to rot if it doesn't have a preservative. So it needs to have a soul of some sort. It has to have some preservative. All flesh, including human flesh, without a preservative, starts to rot within 3 days, starts to smell. So here you have a seed and an egg, essentially flesh, and it's surviving for 40 days before it becomes a fetus. By what means? Elo, therefore, says Antoninus, Mishas Pekida, it must be that the soul is given to it at the moment of conception. So Amar Rabbi responds, Davar zeh, this matter, Lamdeni Antoninus. Antoninus taught me this. I accepted his logic. And then when he said this, I was reminded that there's a verse that supports his position. Shenema, the verse reads, Upkodasecha Shamra Ruchi. And your pakuda, it's a play on words. It literally means your instruction guards my spirit. That's literally what it means. David Melech's Eov says, your instruction, God's instruction, is what keeps me going, keeps my spirit. But if you read the verse almost more literally, Pakudasecha, and the moment of your conception, which is the word pakuda, not just instruction, but also, as we said before, we use this word to mean pekida, we use this word to mean conception. The moment of your conception, Shamra Ruchi, Hashem's already guarding your spirit. And so the moment of conception is already, Hashem is giving the soul. So I should note 2 things. Number 1, this actually has practical application for the question of abortion. At what point is there a soul in the fetus that's permitting or forbidding abortion? And there was, at least the Havamina, the original thought that it should only begin at 40 days, and before that it would be completely permissible because there's no soul, it's just a seed and an egg. And Rabbi accepts from Antoninus that essentially from the moment of conception is already a soul. I should note, however, that when we talk about the soul entering the body, it happens in stages. Here the Gemara says nitna, it's been granted, given to the soul, given to the body. But there are stages by which the soul slowly is nislavish, invests itself and encloses itself into the body, and the completion of that investure only actually happens at age 13, at bar mitzvah, which is when a Jew becomes a Jew, and the soul fully invests itself in the body. And as the Alter Rebbe writes in his second version of the Shulchan Aruch, of which we only have a few chapters, there he writes that the bris is haschalas, is the beginning. So in other words, it's nitna, it's granted at conception. At 40 days, it's invested further. At birth, it invested even further. At the bris, even further. And then as it goes, it gets educated in its Torah, the soul is invested even further and further until it's fully invested at the time of bar mitzvah. But nonetheless, the Gemara's conclusion is at the moment of conception, a soul has already been assigned, given. Neshama. Here the Gemara's term is neshama. Here the Gemara uses the word neshama. Here the Gemara uses the word neshama, and when the Gemara uses the word neshama, it doesn't necessarily mean in the context of the 5 names of the neshama. When you use the word neshama or nefesh, you have to know what context you're talking about. Are you talking about the context of the 5 names nefesh, neshama, chayachida, or do you mean neshama as in the translation soul, which means all 5 levels? And here it means all 5 levels. Unless it's said in the context of the 5 levels, neshama just means the whole soul. So it doesn't necessarily mean one level, not the other. Which one of the levels? Okay, that's another discussion as to which level the neshama comes in. But all 5 of them are referred to on neshama. Right? When the Medrash says that there's 5 levels, it says Chamish Shemes Nikru La. What's La? 5 names are called to the neshama. The neshama itself has 5 names. one of which is neshama. So here when it says neshama, it doesn't mean neshama and not ruach and not nefesh. It just means neshama in the general sense. You have to know the context, generally speaking. Yeah?
You made a comment this a minute ago that the soul being fully invested in the body at age 13.
Bar mitzvah for a boy and for a girl bat mitzvah.
Yeah, okay. Isn't it true that there's an exception to this rule that with respect to Yaakov and Esau, the conflict began while they were in the womb, so that there was a full investment in the case of Yaakov?
I don't know if that's what it means. I don't know that it has to have a full soul invested fully, completely in the body to have that conflict.
I would say maybe.
And I'll you know, if riding the same logic, I'll ask another question. Children also have conflicts before 13. One might say that they have more conflict than kids after 13, or at least after, hopefully, right? So conflict, I don't think is. Yeah, so I don't think that conflict means that the soul has to be fully invested in the body, because even a child before he's 13 can have conflict, can have opinions, can have ideas.
But it is spoken about by our that there is some primordial balance.
Yeah, I don't know.
The Yetzer Hara is much earlier, but the Yetzer Hara talked to
Yeah,
about
we're talking
that.
about
Well, we're going to get to that in the next conversation.
It's a different level.
We'll get to the next conversation. But in other words, but even if we're going to keep it literal and not say that the Esav means the Yetzer Hara, just literally two people in the womb having a conflict, I don't know that it needs to have a full investor of the soul for that to happen. So long as it has life and has a direction, then it can already be in conflict. In other words, the two directions, the two trajectories of their life, which start at conception, as we just heard here, the soul's already granted at conception, so that their trajectory in life has already been set in motion at conception. So right then there's already conflict because there's two trajectories that oppose each other. Also, what does conflict? We're going to get to that in a second. I know, but what does conflict mean in the womb? That they're arguing?
No, they're fighting over.
It means that their trajectories in life are the foreshadowing, right? Their trajectories in life are already at odds, right? And that's fine, even if you don't have full investor in neshama. As soon as the neshama is granted, and the trajectories, like especially as Rashi said it, that Pekida means the moment that the Malach says to Hashem, what's the trajectory of this seed? So already their trajectories are in conflict, even in the womb. I don't know that it requires a full investor. Otherwise, 10-year-olds couldn't have conflict.
No, that's not the problem.
Which they do.
Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara. There's more here. So the Yetzer Hara.
No, I know that. The Yetzer Hara comes later.
At birth.
Yeah.
And the Yetzer Tov.
So God willing, we'll talk about that.
We say that Asa fought the Yetzer Hara.
God willing, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that on Monday.
Okay.
On Monday, when we talk about the next conversation, which is when now we talk about when the soul comes in. When we talk about when the Yetzer Hara comes in, and we're going to talk about the different.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, when the Yetzer Hara comes in, when the Yetzer Tov comes in, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. We'll talk.
But there's another Gemara. Sure, the neshama has to be there.
We're going to talk about that at
all Torah is taught to the child when he's still in the.
That's right.
There's a neshama.
Well, that could be from Yitzira. But anyway, we're going to.
But at least it's before birth, according to everyone.
Certainly going to before birth.
That's right.
At any rate, we're going to talk about that on Monday. But I don't think the issue of conflict changes whether it's fully invested or not fully invested. I'm just responding to Yosef's question. But on Monday, God willing, we're going to get to this entire conversation. Yeah. The stages in which the Yetzer Hara comes in, the Yetzer Tov comes in. Once we have all the conversations related to this done, we're going to get a little deeper into this whole thing of what it means to us.
And for abortion, some hold that within 40 days is different than after 40 days.
I don't want to get the halacha, and it is different.
It's different, yes.
But
this more agree to be
but we should note as follows, actually, since we mentioned the issue of abortion. From Torah perspective, abortion would be forbidden even if it's not a living organism, just by the very fact that it's a potential life. Potential life itself is reason enough by Torah law to forbid abortion. The question is if it would be considered murder or some other crime. That's a separate discussion. But abortion remaining illegal, even if it's potential. Framing it in that way, there are levels in potential. How close you are to birth. And that only changes in such extreme cases that's not worth mentioning. There are only extremely, extremely extreme cases in which abortion is permitted, which is why I'm not mentioning it at all. And it also changes between Jews and non-Jews. The law is different for Jews and non-Jews with respect to abortion, so we are not going to have the conversation. Certainly not on camera.
Exactly.
But nonetheless, you should know that even if you're going to accept that this fetus is not fully alive, it's only potential life, that is enough to make it illegal by Torah law, just by the fact that it's potential
But
life.
of course, there are the leaders.
We're going to leave it. We're going to leave it at that.
Eliezer, for example, other.
But that's what I said. Though the Eliezer's examples are such extreme cases. It's not even worth mentioning because you mention it and it becomes like a hallmark. Those aren't the hallmark cases. Those are the anomalies of the anomalies of the anomalies that are so extreme that the cases he conjures up you wouldn't even imagine existed, or hopefully you never encountered them in your life.
And God forbid it could be taken out of context.
That's why I said I don't want to talk about them because they're the anomalies of the anomalies of the anomalies.
Exactly.
But just note that even if you come across a text which describes a fetus as potential life, it doesn't change the fact that in Torah law, potential life is also forbidden to kill. So it's a question of, is it murder or is it some other form of prohibition?
Everyone agrees. If a fetus threatens the mother's life, then of course you destroy the fetus, save the mother.
And that changes for Jews and non-Jews, so let's leave it at that also.
The Ben Milk is different.
So let's leave it at that. That's what I said. I don't want to get into that. All right, have a wonderful day and a good Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos.